Let's get the views now of Alan Mendoza, Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society, who joins us. Cold War hotting up a bit with bombers flying hither and thither?
Well, it's all rather reminiscent, isn't it, of games being played on both sides. You know, one country sends their bombers that way, another one goes that way. They scramble to repeat them. I mean, it should be worth pointing out, by the way, the Russians have done this for years with the UK.
Yeah.
For years, we've had to scramble planes because the Russians approach our borders. So it's a game the Russians know how to play very well.
But, of course, given the tensions at the moment, you know, one mistake could actually have consequences. And we saw that Reaper, the spy drone shot down, of course. But we're getting perhaps an indication that Xi wants things to calm down a little bit, and that clearly for China, there are not many gains if things hot up in Ukraine particularly.
No, I think the Chinese would love to be the sort of brokering party for some kind of deal. And look, it's clearly in China's interest to sort of freeze the conflict. It's actually, of course, in Russia's interest as well to freeze the conflict, since the Russians are essentially losing at the moment. But it would be a terrible sign if we were to stop right now, because it would just institutionalize Putin's control over the areas that he has aggressively seized. The Chinese would be happy with that, of course, because they don't want to see, as you say, any slippage in their Russian ally, but that's not necessarily good news for the free world, should we say.
Yeah, and the other fear is that China perhaps will become a more active partner, and clearly if they start providing ammunition and military hardware, then the whole balance changes, and Washington will be very concerned about that.
Yes, I mean, that would indicate the Chinese have taken a side, which so far they have studiously avoided doing. If they were to take a side, that would indeed change the military balance, because you would have the Russians being resupplied very quickly with Chinese material. However, that would open the Chinese up, undoubtedly, to American sanctions.
Yeah. Do you think Putin will actually listen if Xi says, that's it, enough is enough, you've really got to rethink this?
He might listen, but the problem is for Putin, he's not in control of that situation. Putin to say, I'm stopping at this point in time, I'm declaring a ceasefire, will not be accepted by Ukraine. So Putin can declare all he likes that he's stopping, but until he withdraws his forces from where they were before the invasion, there's no incentive for Ukraine, and nor should they stop in their attacks.
And prior to this meeting in Moscow, we had the suggestions from Washington that it might be rather useful if President Xi gets on the phone to Zelensky in Ukraine and also discusses the situation with it. Any indication that's about to happen?
Well, the Ukrainians have been pressing for it. There's been an attempt to say, right, you know, if you don't want to come, fine, but can you get on the phone and talk? Because right now you claim to be a neutral party in this, but you've gone there and you haven't gone there. It's also very strange, wouldn't you say, to sort of declare a peace treaty or try and get a peace treaty and then not go to the main victim of the war and talk to them.
Yeah, and what would that deal have to look like? I mean, we assume, for instance, that Ukraine says, you've got to give Crimea back to us. That's, you know, that's a given.
We would assume that, but look, the details of that are for Ukraine and Russia to work out with the China if they want to go down that route. The reality is we know publicly the Ukrainians have said they want all their territory back, everything that's been taken since 2014, and that's understandable. Why wouldn't they? You know, I don't know if there'll be an interim deal done in that sort of way, if that's even viable. I'm not sure there is a viable, you know, kind of way through here right now, and it's not just posturing on the Chinese part.
And the other aspect, of course, everyone's trying to interpret the body language and whether Putin has got the tremors, or is his leg shaking, is his arm shaking, whatever. We are being told that China does not necessarily want to see Putin removed. They prefer to see him in place and things just held on a steadier, calmer sort of basis.
The Chinese hate any instability of any kind. They are very much, when it comes to their allies, a status quo power. They don't want to see anyone kicked out. They don't want to see anyone removed, because, of course, the corollary of that is we could be next.
Well, yeah, or Poland, or the Baltic states, of course. Alan, thank you very much indeed for your assessment. Of course, we'll keep you updated with what happens in those official talks in Moscow.